Hi, I'm Jen.
And I'm Andrew. Welcome to 3600 Living. 3600 Living is the stories that we've learned while living on Hawaii Island.
I like that.
Our goal is to share what we learn every day, because every day is different. Every day you learn something new. And so we've made it a goal to put this stuff down so that we can share what we've learned with you.
What happens now?
Welcome to the kickoff segment for 3600 Living.
Okay.
It's a pretty big deal. Thought she was going to say okay again. So when we talk to people, friends, people we meet, one of the questions I always love is, where do you live? And I usually smile and I say, well, most of the year we spend our time in Indiana. But the reality is probably most of the year we spend our time on Hawaii Island. The question that we get as a second question, people dig into that a little bit. The question people always come to is, they say, well, how did you get there? How did you decide to buy a house on Hawaii Island? And what was the process? So what do you say when people ask that, Jen?
That we came here Christmas of 22 and fell in love with the island. And then you started looking for a house.
And we started looking for a house and we met a realtor. Yeah, so we took this, Jen, simplicity of story, right? We're talking story. She made it so simple. It really went more like this, where she said, I booked a trip to Hawaii Island for us and the unmarried kids. I said, oh, that's exciting. And she had booked an Airbnb, but we couldn't book airlines yet because they were with Southwest and they hadn't opened the calendar. And then when they opened the calendar, we found ourselves in a serious quandary because the ticket price was higher than anything I have ever seen on Southwest, and we had to get 5 of us here. 5 of us plus 1. So we were already pot committed. And so we booked the tickets. I mean, they were $1,800 tickets, ludicrous for Southwest. We've never spent that kind of money on a vacation ever. I was actually very upset. I think I was fairly upset.
Hey, but look where we are now. It all worked out.
And so right before we came over, to make the story full circle, literally 2 weeks before.
It was a week.
A week before we were arriving, and it was over Christmas. We get a message in the Airbnb app from our host. We had chosen to book a place. We won't share his profile or mention his name or anything, but we had booked a place over in the Puna district, which is the southeast corner of the island. That's the newest section of the island where the volcanoes have flowed and actually increased the land mass on the southeast corner of the island, all the flows that have happened over the past decade or so. And we get a message a week before, and he says, hey, literally the message is, I could probably read it. He says something like, hey, sorry to let you know, but the power company just let me know today that they're going to be shutting my power down for a month. I have to cancel. Period. That was it. And so we were both reading it, making sure we read it correctly. We messaged with him, and he said, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I won't have power. And we're thinking there's no way he just found this out. Having been on the island and having worked with the power company, it's actually very possible that they just called up today and said, oh, by the way, we're going to be doing something crazy. Now, to be shut down for a month, I don't think so. I think he probably had somebody he wanted to get in there for a longer term at a better rate, and we had booked earlier and blah, 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 blah. So anyways, we come over here. We scrambled for about 3 days to put together locations to stay. Instead of this really cool place that we had booked that had a pool, it was kind of on the coast over on that side of the island where we were going to be, and we had room for everybody. It was a house. We now were forced to find somewhere else to be the busiest week of the year on one of the busiest locations in the world for the holidays. So we were both scrambling, and she shows up one day and she's like, I found
an Airbnb on the south side,
Found an Airbnb on the south side.
but not for all of the days.
Not for all of the days, and also not a house. It ended up being
2 studios.
2 studio apartments that looked very nice. Our host, who have become our friends, Alex and Kate, we'll give a shout out to them. One of the big reasons that we ended up here. Huge personalities and absolute super hosts. They're just phenomenal. And so we showed up. She knew the scenario. We had these 2, like what are referred to over here as Ohana units. Ohana, if you've watched Moana, means family. But over here, the word Ohana is also used to identify a second dwelling unit on your property because it's part of your Ohana, your family, although it's a separate part. Sometimes the rooms are in the same building, but most of the time it's a separate unit of some kind. So we found their 2 Ohana units, 2 small studio, bathroom, I think ours had a queen bed, and the other room had 3 twin beds or something, and so that's all we had. We ended up, for that trip, having to do like a few nights there, and then we came up here where we are right now to Hapuna. We stayed at a hotel, and then we had to go back to the west side of the island, over on Ali'i Drive, south of Kona just a little bit, and we stayed there for a few nights, and then I just feel like we were all over. We had to kind of piece together places, but we ended up staying all around the island. I mean, we literally explored the entire island at a really high level for that week something we were here. And then we decided last minute, let's put the kids on the plane, and Jen and I stayed, and we went up to the north side of the island, which we hadn't stayed at, Hawaii. It's an old sugarcane area. It's the birthplace of King Kamehameha. There's just so much culture up there, and it was just super quiet, at elevation, cool nights. We stayed in an old plantation house. So quiet. Like, you could hear the neighbors flush the toilet 5 acres away. It was just so quiet up there. I'm exaggerating, but and so then as we were talking during that next year, we left the island, right? And we get back home, and we had been trying to find a second house. We'd been trying to find a second place, to find a place. We were looking in Vegas. We were looking in Phoenix. We were looking in other places in Arizona. We had looked around in Florida, in South Florida. We had looked in like Tennessee. I mean, we were just trying to get out of the snow belt, right? I think I've dedicated enough years of my life, actually all of them, to living in the snow belt. So I'm ready for a change. And so we were looking. And then while we were over here, was it that time while we were over here? Yeah, I just happened to pop open like Realtor.com. And I'm like, wait, we're kind of looking for a house. Does everybody do that?
No, just you.
I do that. Anytime I'm in an area and I'm like, I always think to myself, and I look at her and I'd be like, I could live here, right?
Pretty much.
She probably says something like that. I could live here. Pop open Realtor.com, and we were looking around the south side of the island, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we could actually do this. We could find a little bit of a fixer-upper, and that's a story for another day. And, maybe do this. I would love a project like that. So we had already scheduled with some friends to come back the next year in like 4 or 5 months, right? It was just that next March. It was in March, I think, that next year. We decided we were going to do a hiking trip in Kauai. We ended up doing a little bit of hiking on Maui, and then we spent a week in Kauai. And then Jen and I bolted a couple days early and jumped back over to Big Island, Hawaii Island, and we met with our realtor, Patty. And Patty was recommended by Alex and Kate, our newfound friends, Airbnb hosts on the south side. And so we met Patty, and we drove all over the south side and looked at lots of properties, and we put an offer on one. And it came back, and there was problems with the lanai. The lanai is what we would on the mainland refer to as a deck. You've got a deck. It's a wooden structure that's on the outside of the house typically, and that is the lanai. And so we had some problems with the lanai from the inspection. Like, basically the inspector said, look, the thing wasn't built right, and they've basically screwed the lanai into the 4x8 exterior sheeting, and that's what's holding the lanai against the house. Not the studs, it's just kind of screwed in randomly to the 4x8 exterior sheeting, right? And we were like, okay, well, that's a problem. And he said, and because of the way it's built and the way the roof, above the lanai goes up and then attaches to the main roof, when the lanai comes off the house, it's literally going to pull the entire backside of the house's roof with it. I said, okay, well, that does seem like a problem. Not something I necessarily want to tackle like day one. And so we went back to them and said, hey, would you consider, some sort of concession? Yeah, fixing it or some sort of concession. And their response was, we'll give you $1,000. We were just like, I feel like this is a 30% of the house project renovation right there in that one item that could go really bad. And so we passed on that. And we were kind of bummed, but we were glad that it was a beautiful house. We still drive by it all the time because it's in our subdivision. And we see it has beautiful rainbow or painted eucalyptus trees. They're just gorgeous. That was kind of the thing. Jen said, she said when we were looking, she's like, if one of these houses has rainbow eucalyptus, then that's the one. And so we rolled up to this place. It was big. It was maybe 1,500 square feet. It was on 2 levels. It had a lot of storage underneath, a couple parking spots underneath. Everything on the island is on stilts a lot of the time because the island isn't flat. And so they just built everything up on stilts. You don't have to worry about, it's a temperate climate, so you don't have to worry about insulating for, extreme heat and extreme cold. And so there's a lot of space, and we drove up and there was all these painted eucalyptus. They like bordered the whole property right on a corner. And we were like, okay, this is it. This is really cool. It had a vaulted ceiling, which I love the old Hawaiian vaulted ceiling. They do a tongue and groove above the beams in the vaulted ceiling. And this one just had so much potential. 3 bedrooms, the kitchen needed, I was really excited about the house, but we kind of let it go. And we were bummed. How bummed were you?
A little bummed.
She was a little bummed. She didn't want that big of a project.
No.
And so I think it was that next Monday.
No, it was a Friday.
That was a Friday, like right afterwards?
It was a Friday
Oh, it
that
was a
Patty
Friday.
went up there.
That's right. So on like a Friday morning, I think, we get a notification from one of the realtor sites, right, Patty's site, that she had set up a query for us. And it said, new properties in the area. And we looked at one, and it was like brand new house. Like it was just built the year before. And we looked at it, and the size was right, and the location looked great. There's so much you have to learn. We'll share about our subdivision in another session. But so much you have to learn about neighbors and looking out, for the area and making sure it's a good area. And permitting. Unpermitted houses, another segment. And so this one was fully permitted. It was new. And so we called Patty right away and said, Patty, you got to go. You got to go check this out. Like right now, it just came on the market. It's going to go fast. It's brand new. Can you go? And she called back. She said, well, they didn't have any showings until like 6 p.m. So I'm going to go up there at 6. And she lives in the southern part of our subdivision. And so she went up there at 6 p.m. and she called, and it was 11 p.m. our time, right? Because we were back in Indiana. And so she calls me. I jump out of bed, grab the call, and she's just kind of walking around. So we had seen the listing and the photos in the listing. And then we had Patty, and Patty's just walking around. She didn't even FaceTime. She just walked around. She said, oh, that's really nice. Oh, I love the colors. Oh, I like what they did with the kitchen. It's very spacious. Oh, the bathroom is big. She just was telling us all these things that she liked about the house. She even climbed under. Patty's 88 years old this year. She had just had, I think, hip replacement or knee replacement. I'm like, what are you doing climbing under a house? But she's climbing under. She's like, oh, it's very spacious. You could almost kind of walk through under here. A lot of room. It's very clean. It was well built. I can see the foundations. And we were like, okay, Patty, that's enough. We need to put an offer in. And she goes, no, I've got to go over to Oahu for some family time this weekend. I'm getting on a plane this afternoon. I'll put the offer in Monday. And we were like, no, Patty, you've got to put the offer in tonight. And so she managed which would have been early hours of the morning for us. But at the end of her day, she got to Oahu, sat down, cracked open the computer, wrote up the offer. We signed it. We submitted it. We did a couple back and forths. And we ended up getting an accepted offer for the house. And we got to meet the builder, who was the person selling it. And so we got introduced to Rob Witters and his wife. Super nice guy. he does a great job building homes. I think he's originally from somewhere in the Pac Northwest. I want to say Oregon, but part of me also says it's southern, like Seattle area, south of the Puget, maybe Tacoma, somewhere like that. I can't remember, but at any rate, he works with crews. They build the primary. He comes over. He finishes the house. He does the trim work, the flooring, the cabinetry, kind of puts the final spin on it, and then he lives in them, and then he sells them. And so we were house number 2. We were his second build. He is living in his third, and I think that's his, like, he'll stay there house. He just built number 4 and sold it, and I think 5 is also almost done. But at any rate, it's like the ones he's building now are carbon copies of our house, almost identical. So it's neat to see when they pop up for sale. I know it's him. I call him and say, "Hi, Rob, you got another one for sale?" Yeah, we just finished it. We just put it up for sale. They sell so quick. He does a really good job. So that's how we got to the island. That's how we found our house. And then that was in March, April, I think, when we had accepted offer. We closed in June, and then I came over at the end of June. It was the end of June, with my goal of taking what was a 10 by 20 shed and a 10 by 20 carport and converting that into an ohana, a small additional dwelling that we could have guests to stay in, or I could use as an office. We weren't quite sure exactly. I had a little bit of a drawing. Rob was kind enough to finish the carport side off for me, and so I walked into a blank canvas, a 20 by 20 shed, unfinished everything, right, except it had a little bit of a door, and so that became my project for the first. My goal was 4 weeks. It took me, I think, 5 to turn it into an ohana, and we can share some pictures. I have a video of what it looks like as a walkthrough. Finished product, turned out really nice. We love it. And we do Airbnb it every once in a while, and we have guests stay in it, and everybody that stays there loves it. So that was kind of our initial, how did we get here? It was one of those crazy decisions. We just did it. We just did it. The market had tanked, and I was tired of losing money in my 401k. So we paused the 401k and we decided to invest in the house in Hawaii, which seems to be moving up in value fairly steadily, maybe a little more consistently than my 401k was at the time. But that's kind of how we decided to make that, to do that. So when people say, well, how did you, like, mind blown, how did you get from Indiana to Hawaii? How do you have a house in Hawaii? I don't know. That was a really long answer to that question, but that's a lot of the details that we share at some level. So, shouts out to Patty, our realtor. Shout out to Alex and Kate for just being such a gracious host. We just stood around and talked, and they had moved from Texas. Similar story a few years prior. And so, it was like listening to their story. We were encouraged. We could do this. And they had 2 younger kids, right, that they're over here with, and they both work. And, well, at the time, I think he was working and traveling for work like I do. And so at any rate, that's the how. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
I think, I don't know. What do you think our friends thought of that? I think our friends were pretty cool with it overall.
I think our friends know that you're
crazy. Yeah. Okay. So
this is probably not out of the realm.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, we were expecting something totally different. This is normal. Family. Do you think family thought we were crazy? I don't know.
Nah.
I think most of our kids have been. I think all of our kids have been to the island, but not all of our kids have been to our house. So all of our kids have had honeymoons or vacations or honeymoons or weddings on island, but not all of them have stayed at the house. Some of them had stayed at our house more than once. So that's exciting. What else am I forgetting? How did we get here?
I don't think anything.
I don't know. So Southwest has great rates, and when you have status and obviously companion flies free, that makes this very palatable. For me, if I'm on conferences on West Coast, it's almost as easy to come here as it is to go back to Indiana. Direct route here, 2 stops, one stop to get back to Indiana. We had to buy some cars. We shipped a couple over. We'll talk about that. We could share about that process in a future segment. There's so many stories to share. Literally, we end every day, and I just kind of like stare at her when we're here, like every day, and I'm thinking, okay, we learned something new today. Like we didn't know that. That's how that works. Or I'm trying to learn more of the Hawaiian culture, and I'm trying to learn more of the Hawaiian language and words. And so, I mean, at the very least, I'm learning new words or components of the language and like putting it together in my mind. All of our house has a name. I believe the name is Hale Kainani Ka'u, which means the house with Kainani means ocean and majestic. So basically it's the house of majestic ocean. And our front lanai looks at about a 200-degree view of ocean. It's way down there, but it's there. And then Ka'u is the county we live in, which is the south part of the island. So it's the house in the south part of the island with majestic or beautiful ocean views. That's the name of our house. We have another saying in the house. I think it's on the board. It's Nana Mai Ke Au, which is a view from the clouds. Many times the clouds roll in and you're just in the clouds. You're at 3,600 feet, 3611 to be exact. And the clouds roll in and you're just in the middle of it. But if you were to drive down the hill 2 miles, 5 miles, it's probably sunny or it could be raining. You know, you drive to Kona, it's hot. You drive to Hilo, it's wet. South side of the island is less wet and very, very enjoyable from a temperature standpoint. So we'll share more of these in this segment. We don't have any cool wrap-up sayings or anything yet, so I guess we'll just let you go until next time. In Hawaiian, ahui ho means until we see you again or until we meet again. So ahui ho and aloha.